This is chapter 3 that we're going to start working on, Stress and Health Psychology, part 1. All right. As with everything, it is always my hope that we can interact with one another. What I decided to do for this particular chapter on the Mythbusters, I'm going to open up a discussion board. And in that discussion board, I want you to be able to respond. So I'm not going to, I know you probably see it in an assignment. We won't have to worry about it in the assignment itself because I'm going to have you discuss what your thoughts are in the discussion board. Okay? So stop and pause this video for a moment. Take a look at the responses. Say true or false for them. And then go to the discussion board that's going to be called The Truth About Stress and give what you think. Okay? Pause now. All right. So when we're defining stress, understand that anything that places a demand on our bodies can cause stress. The trigger that prompts the stressful reaction, this is called a stressor. And stress reactions, they can occur in response to either internal cognitive type of stimuli or that external stimuli. It can even be environmental type stimuli. Pleasant or beneficial stress, such as moderate exercise, would be called eustress. Okay? That's that kind of stress that we want. Because believe it or not, we are supposed to have some stress in our lives. But there are these two types. Eustress, which would be that pleasant, desirable type of stress. And then there's the distress. That's that stress that's unpleasant or objectionable. It can be created from chronic illnesses. And we'll talk more about it in terms of when we learn about gas. I'm going to leave it at that, my fun little joke for the day. But the total absence of stress pretty much would mean that there's a total absence of any kind of stimulation. And guess what? Without that stimulation, it eventually would lead us to death. So we need some type of stress in our lives. The point of the fact of the matter is the type of stress is extremely important. So I want you to think about what would be considered good eustress. What type of stressors are good for us? Now, there are 7 major sources of stress. And if you're looking at this slide, we have cataclysmic events. Think about hurricanes. We have conflicts. Okay? That's those things that we might have to make decisions about, or there's something that's troubling us in our problem-solving abilities. And who do not get frustrated? Frustration is a major source of stress. Then we have those hassles, those little things that add up. You have life changes. Think about the different life changes, such as you going to college. There's also those chronic stressors that can come from chronic illnesses, disease, and so forth, as well as job stress. So these are some areas that you want to take a look at. Now, early stress researchers, Thomas Holmes and Richard Ra, they believed that any life change required some significant adjustment in behavior or lifestyle could cause some degree of stress. They also believed that exposure to numerous types of stressful events within a short period of time would have a detrimental effect on our health. So, in order to investigate that relationship between change and stress, Holmes and Ra, they kind of created this scale called the Social Readjustment Rating Scale, or the SRRS. Now, basically what it did was ask people to check off all the different type of life events that they had experienced within the last 12 months. Now, normally we would do this as a class activity, but just for yourselves, I want you to take a look, and what you'll see is life events, and next to it you'll see life change units. Take a moment of time and just go through each of these and see what you might have had experience within the last 12 months. What this will do is help you to gauge how much stress is in your life. And you'll be able to see if the stress can actually be harmful to you to the point where you might become ill. One of the things they're going to do is I'm going to tell you how to score yourselves, okay? So after you take this and look at all of them, I want you to add up those life change units. If you fall in between 0 to 49, guess what? You're doing great. No significant problems to be able to deal with. If you land between 150 to 199, well, now you have to look at, you might be presented with a mild life crises, okay? And the chance of becoming ill because of that, within this range, there's a 33% chance that you may become ill. So you're going to want to work on it if you're falling in that area. If you find that you are at 200 to 299, this is considered moderate life crisis. And now your chance for becoming ill increases to about 50%. Anyone that falls within 300 and above, you're dealing with a major life crisis. And the likelihood of illness now has increased to 80%. So you want to kind of be able to gauge yourself so that you can prepare yourself to do something about it. Change it before it actually impact and affect you. Because life happens. All right. So before we talked about the seven major sources of stress, let's take a closer look at them. The first one is cataclysmic. I gave an example about hurricanes. Okay. But understand that it's those stressful occurrences that's going to happen suddenly and usually simultaneously where we have no true control. Okay. So make sure you understand it. And if you have a question, of course, send it to me. Now, when we're talking about chronic stressors, this is those long-term type of stresses that's going to be persistent. It's something that wears a person down. Chronic stresses like war, a bad marriage, poor working conditions. It can be a repressive political climate, hint, hint. Uh, Anything that's going to be significantly for a length of time that's troublesome for you. Even the stress of low frequency noise can be associated with measurable hormonal as well as cardiac changes that can impact us. It could be considered chronic. Within our social lives, it also can be chronically stressful by making friends and keeping those type of relationships. Think about the amount of thought and energy that goes into developing relationships. It could be stressful. All right. So, given the recent global economic meltdown that we've been enduring in the last few years, it's been up and down. It's been a roller coaster. One of our most pressing concerns would be job stress. And this includes unemployment, being able to keep or even changing jobs or thinking about our job performance. The most stressful jobs are those that can make the greatest demands on our performance as well as concentration, but it doesn't allow for any creativity or the opportunity for us to advance. Those can be the most stressful. So stress at work is going to increase. The probability of it increasing and creating serious stress at home is high, okay? Not only for the person at the job, but for their family members when they come home. I can recall when my sons were young and I had a rough day, they kind of gauged the look on my face. If I came in the house not looking too happy, they knew to give me an hour so I can de-escalate because I probably still had work on my back. So, thankfully, it wasn't while I was a psychologist. This was prior to becoming a psychologist. But nonetheless, stress can impact more than just you. It can impact the whole family if not taken care of. So in our private lives, we deal with divorce. We might have to deal with child and spousal abuse. It could be alcoholism. There's money problems that could be placed. There could be severe stress on all the members that's infected by job stress that moves out into us trying to self-medicate and do things that make ourselves feel better. It can trickle into our family. Okay, so we need to be careful of that. Now, when we talk about conflicts, stress can arise when we experience a conflict, and that's going to be when we're forced to make a choice between at least two incompatible type of alternatives that we're dealing with. So on the slide, what you're going to see is that there are three basic types of conflicts uh, that we have to consider, that we might experience. So now let's talk about the first one. The first one, approach conflicts. This one is considered the easiest to resolve, and pretty much it doesn't produce any real level of stress. Okay? Think of it like this. Imagine you go to a car dealership, you're going to get yourself a brand new car. You see a Buick that you fell in love with, the Buick Enclave, I think it's called, because you're into SUVs. But on the other hand, there's a Ford Edge that you might be interested in as well. You like those too. An approach conflict is when you're forced to choose between two things you actually like. Okay? It's like they're both desirable. You like both of them. And now I gotta, which one am I gonna go with? Do I go with the Buick or do I go with the Ford? It's not that you're gonna stress out too much. Eventually you do make up your mind. And this is a type of conflict that actually is really not stressful to you. It's something of pleasure that you're choosing for yourself. That's considered to be approach, the double plus. Now, there are going to be times when we have avoidance type of situations. Think of it as dealing with the most difficult because all the choices they're unpleasant. You really don't want to deal with any of them. Longer any conflict might exist between these type of decisions, the more stress you're going to get. So with avoidance, let's say, I have to choose between paying my car note or paying my rent because I only have enough to do one. Now, here's the thing. What makes it avoidance? One, you don't have much money. Financially, you're strapped right now. You have two situations where both bills need to be paid, but now you have to stop and choose one or the other on which one gets paid. It's a decision that you really don't want to be bothered with. So that's what makes it avoidance. Okay? Then the third one would be the approach avoidance. Now with approach avoidance, here's the decision of conflict when you got to decide between something you want to something you don't want. Let's go back to that financial strap. On the side, you can decide whether or not you're going shopping for a new outfit because you're getting ready to start a new job. But on the other hand, your rent is due. Which one do you choose? The new outfit would be considered your approach because you want a new outfit, you like clothes. Whereas that rent, it's a necessity, you need to pay it, but once you pay it, you have no money for an outfit. So then you have this conflict, and there's that dissonance that you're fighting through to try to figure out which one do I do. The longer you lean on it, the more stressful it can become. Okay? Now, I mentioned hassles earlier. I need for you to think about what is a hassle. Now, this will be an assignment, okay? This will be part of the assignment. What I want you to think about are being able to look at and discuss those little hassles that might occur to you during the day. Here's an example. Traffic jams. Hate getting stuck in a traffic jam. That's considered a hassle. I hate when someone cuts me off when I'm on my way to work. That's a hassle. What I would like for you to do is think about the at least 10 hassles you might have experienced through the day. List those 10 out for me, okay? Because hassles are those small problems that we deal with every day. But when they accumulate, it can and probably will become a major source of stress. Now, you've had the fun listing out your 10. I want you to now just continue with this and think about those 10 and prioritize them a little bit. Which one created more stress in you? Okay? Remember, hassles are those small problems of daily living that would accumulate and can become a major source. This persistent hassles would lead to burnout, which is also that physical, mental, and emotional sense of exhaustion. You ever feel just whipped? It's like, oh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this day. Well, when you are overstressed on a continuous basis, when it's becoming chronic, you tend to go through what we call burnout. There are some careers in which burnout is high. Can you think of any? In the meantime, understand that there are time pressures that can impact you with hassles, financial concerns. Did I get paid today like I was supposed to? Or did they hold up my check? Absences will happen when you hit burnout. You become less productive and you start taking more risks with your job. So you have to be careful of that as well. So now we're going to talk about frustration. Now, many of you, I know I've given y'all some stress in this course, which I apologize. I don't mean to stress you out, because I've had people have trouble with my assignments, which I thought I was being quite helpful, but they're still going to go on just the same way. We have to sometimes adapt to a situation. But I know that people struggle with the fact that there's a lot of reading involved with my assignments. Well, this is to kind of ensure that you are getting the material. And yes, through every single thing, especially because when I say assignment questions, I want you to answer those questions. But if you're never sure, do all of it. It enhances your learning ability. So just make sure you take your time and read. That's why you get a whole week. It gives you the week to read the chapter. But guess what? My assignments give you the majority of the chapter. And I do that because some people do not get their books in a timely fashion. It happens. Life do happen. I make sure that you have everything that you can use because we'll be having an exam. And guess what? Our exam is right after this. So I need for you to, be prepared. But it can be stressful and frustrating when you're not sure. The more motivated we are, the more frustrated we will be when we can't get things done. So, frustration is that negative emotional state that results from a blocked goal or being able not to complete an action. Okay? You have to think about how you might feel if you did not get your job you wanted, for an example. Okay? Or you didn't get through that homework assignment in the way you would like to because you just felt like it was too much. We go through all kind of different things that we have to contend with and deal with, but doesn't mean that that frustration is not going to be present. And because of that frustration, guess what, folks? It's considered a form of stress, and it can be a major one. So we have to be careful on that. Now, you heard me mention in the beginning of the lecture gas. Well, gas is a biological response, and it's actually an acronym for General Adaptation Syndrome. Okay? So, more or less, when mentally or physically stressed, our bodies will undergo several biological type of changes that can be detrimental to our health. Okay? In 1936, Hans Selye, he described a general physiological type of reaction to stress, which he called the general adaptation syndrome, or gas. Not the gas that bubbles up, but the gas that consumes our whole psyche and being physically. The gas will occur in 3 phases, okay? So let's look at the first one. The alarm phase. This is when you might feel threatened, challenged, you might be surprised. Your body is going to start going into this phase in which it's got to decide whether you need to resist or suppress stress. And while it's high in this state, your body, the physiological changes are increased body rate. You might sweat, not body weight, but increased heart rate. You may start sweating, those heart palpitations, contraction of muscles. You'll want to know, okay, do I stay and deal with this, or should I flee? Which is what we call fight or flight. Okay? And we learned what fight or flight comes from, right? When we talked about what part of the nervous system. Answer that for yourselves. All right, so that's the alarm phase. We have resistance as well as exhaustion. So the resistance is going to be activated by our efforts to be able to adapt to that initial stressor, whether it be physical or psychological. Those different stresses can evoke different responses, and people, they'll vary widely in how they'll react. One of the most interesting ways that people would differ in their stress response has to be, it has to do with whether they're male or female. Men often use the fight or flight, where women will tend to, try to befriend and understand with clarity. They'll take care of themselves as well as their children. That's that tending portion. They'll attempt to create strong social bonds with others. Okay? Some researchers have believed that there are differences hormonally. Okay? And although oxytocin is released during stress in both men and women, and make a note of this, women have higher levels of estrogen. It tends to enhance the oxytocin, where the results would be more of a calm and a nurturing type of effect and feeling. Whereas testosterone in men will produce more levels of stress, and it reduces that effect of oxytocin. So, think of resistance as that time that you're trying to resolve a situation and get rid of it and end the stress. There are times, though, when we can't do so. And the longer our body deals with the stress, the higher the incidence will go. And one of the things our body do when it's trying to combat stress is it creates a hormone called cortisol. And with cortisol, it's supposed to help ease things down, but sometimes that doesn't happen. During the exhaustion phase is when our body will deteriorate. It will come up with all kind of illnesses and diseases such as heart disease. A person overstressed who have predispositions for diabetes can become diabetic. The list can grow and carry. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. Now, in Selye's most important take on this whole situation is that our bodies are relatively well designed for the temporary stress, but it's poorly equipped for dealing with prolonged stress. So at the same time, biological processes that are adaptive in the short run, such as within our fight or flight responses, can become hazardous in the long run. When you're looking at this, it kind of gives you that breakdown when we talk about SAM and HPA. SAM is sympathoadrenomedullary system, and the HPA is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And hopefully what it'll do is help you to kind of understand how this all takes place. Now, I mentioned in the last slide that a hormone is cortisol would be a key element for us, and it's actually generated through the HPA axis. What it does is play a critical role in how the long-term effects of stress might impact us. So an example can be increased cortisol levels. Initially, it'll help us to fight those stressors. However, the longer we have to fight and deal with it, and that cortisol stay at that high level, the more it's going to start helping in producing disease-fighting immune system suppression. So the longer the cortisol is there, the weaker our immune system tends to get. Prolonged elevation of cortisol can also contribute to some diseases such as hypertension. It can attribute to depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as drug and alcohol abuse. In pregnant women, it can also contribute to low birth weights in infants. So as you can see, it's important that we try to keep balance with ourselves. As if this long list of ill effects wasn't enough, severe or prolonged stress can also produce an overall physical type of deterioration. That being, you start aging prematurely. It can even lead you to death if we're not careful. So pretty much, to sum this all up, the SAM system and the HPA axis, they're kind of designed to increase our energy for dealing with emergencies. Yet, when we're dealing with continued arousal and chemical onslaught, it's going to deplete our body's energy reserves, thereby creating various stress-related type problems, health problems. This is going to be the end of part 1, and we will continue in part 2 of chapter 3.